Om Namo Narayana, Om Namah Shivaya, Shiva Om, Shivaham, Om. Take two. Welcome to another satsang with your host Chuck the Yogi from the Yogi Cave. Let us continue. It's 3.13. Atena Bhutta Indriyeshu Dharma Lakshana Avastha Parinama Vyakyataha. By this are also explained the transformation of form, time variation, and condition with regards to the elements and sense organs. So again, as I stated, take one, as a yogi begins to understand antecedents and consequences, how things snowball from one thing to the next, and understands the mechanics of these things, a yogi can begin to understand the past, present, and future of anything that the yogi or yogini focuses on. So this is the essential nature of what it means when people talk about extraordinary abilities of yogis or monks and what have you. That's because they've dedicated an inordinate amount of time and effort to understand the mechanics of how things unfold. Therefore, they begin to understand the mechanics of karma, which again comes from the root kri, to create. So based on the antecedents of thoughts, actions, behaviors, come consequences. So a yogi or yogini can get to the point where they can see that if they do this, this will be the consequence of it, or if that person does that, or they can look at somebody and say, well, this person is in good material for initiation based on this, and the other. Or this person has a chance. So they begin to see the underlying mechanics of what brings a person to do such and such. And if they do such and such, what will be the consequences? So there's that in a nutshell. Let's get to 3.14 where I got stuck the last time. Take one. Shanta Udita Avyapadeshya Dharma Anupati Dharmi. The form bearer, the substance, is that which conforms to the quiescent, uprisen, or indeterminate form. Okay. So, again, this kind of harkens back to the Sankhya philosophy, and remember that yoga, to a large extent, is based on the Sankhya philosophy. You have the field, which is Purusha, or spirit, then you have the construct, which is Prakriti, and then you have the three states of matter, right? Tamas, right, which is black in color, that's the colors attributed to it. Rajas, which is red in color, which is a state of activity, tamas being the state of inertia, and then sattva, which is represented as the color white and represents purification or rarefication of a substance. So understanding quiescent, uprisen, or indeterminate form of everything, every given thing, is to some extent to understand what gunas predominate in such a situation, or predominate in a person, or predominate in a karmic act, and so forth and so on. So, according to science, there's positive, negative, and neutral in terms of energy, atomic energy. The Sankhya philosophy has a very similar outlook as far as like how things manifest in the construct. So I'm not going to get too much into detail. This can get confusing. Patanjali is highly technical, so I'm just trying to simplify it just enough so that I can reach as many people as I can without boring anybody to death. Anyway, 3.15. Krama anyatvam parinama anyatvehetu. The differentiation in the sequence is the reason for the differentiation and the transformation. So now we're getting into very, very technical, almost quantum physics type stuff. And I think the Sanskrit term really Buddhist term that comes to mind when I read this passage or sutra is the notion of kshana, or the notion of a moment and time space, which would be very akin to the notion of a collapse, or Planck scale, Planck time space, or what have you. So that moment, that kshana, right, is basically, let's put it this way, because it can get really confusing. The latest understanding as far as science is concerned, and when I mean science, I mean physics, quantum physics, is that time is not continuous, it is discrete. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that time moves forward and jumps from one moment to the next. There's no continuity. Just like when you watch an old real movie film, it looks like there's this continuity, but it's an illusion, right? It's composed of different photographs that, as they move, they give the illusion of movement. Same thing with a computer program. It's just ones and zeros flashing on a screen, just like this right now. And it gives you, the viewer, the illusion of movement. And so, what Patanjali is getting to here is into the very particular aspects of time-space. But not only that, it's also important for the yogin to understand what is in between those moments, those kshanas, right? That infinity that holds it all together, right, is what the yogin eventually expands to the point where that infinity is all that counts, because samadhi is lying in there somewhere between that gap between moments and space-time. So I'm not going to get too deep into this rabbit hole, but I'm just going to lay it like that and move on to the next thing. So, let's see. 3.16, I believe it was. Yeah. Parinama Traya Samyama Atita Anagata Jana. Through constraint on the three forms of transformation comes about knowledge of the past and the future, as I was saying before. So I'm not going to go much past this, because we're beginning to get into the notion and the section of siddhis, or abilities, that the yogins are purported to be able to obtain through their tapasya, or their efforts. So he begins with this in the sense of understanding the three states of transformation of any given object. You can begin to understand, as I explained before, past, present, and future of that object, or that person, or that phenomena, whatever it is, right? Because we're talking about a hologram. And in a hologram, that moment contains all the information you need to understand that object, right? And so a yogin begins to understand things holographically, because that's what's going on in your conscious mind. Because I would argue that consciousness is not an epiphenomena or an emergent phenomena from the brain. I would argue that consciousness is fundamental to that state or field that in yoga is called Purusha, or spirit, if you will. I call it the field, doesn't matter. It's just words, right? No need to get hung up on words, okay? But what's important to understand, and Patanjali is getting into this, is the understanding of holography, in terms of seeing a phenomena and understanding the whole totality of that phenomena right before them. And yogins can reach that point where they, like a laser beam, they just hit anything and they can understand it instantly when they're true masters. So I'm not going to get too deep into all that, but we begin on the section, or in the section, to enter the section of siddhis, or abilities. This is where things can get pretty crazy and mythological, but we're going to try to keep it as low-key, down to earth, commonsensical as much as we can, right? Not go too crazy off the deep conspiracy theory end or anything like that. We're going to keep it short, sweet, and simple to the extent that we can. Anyway, let's leave it there. Om Namo Narayana, Om Namah Shivaya, Shivam, Shivam, Jai Ma, Jai Mahakal. Till next time.